So we'll shortly be beginning our session, which will actually decode a lot about tests. So tests, I'm sure you guys are aware that there's a lot of myth around which test do I need to give? Okay, which exam is right for me? Is it TOEFL? Is it IELTS? Okay, and we'll try in this marathon workshop, try to decode what does each of these tests entail, and we'll be clarifying a lot of doubts. We have a wonderful panelist with her directly all the way from Kaplan Test Prep joining us today. Hi, Heather. Hear me? Good morning.
Hello, everyone.
Wonderful to have you, Heather.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so a bit of background about Heather. So Heather herself is a 99 percentiler for the ACT exam, and she has helped across her tenure thousands of students take up that skill, learn about IELTS, learn about TOEFL as an examination. She loves teaching students and loves teaching students how they can actually attempt answering incorrectly. And again, she herself was a pre-college live online teacher of the year in 2019. Okay, she's been with Kaplan for almost 11 years. That's more than a decade worth of experiences. Yes, and she's been helping students how to find answers to those trap questions. Okay, she teaches a lot of stuff related to SATs, IELTS, TOEFL, IELTS examinations as well. She loves drinking iced coffee even during winters. So something which I too love. So something that we have in common. Okay, and she has also taught at several kindergartens, and she has 3 kids. Again, she teaches them, and all of them are homeschooled. So lovely to have you here, Heather, and looking forward to learning a lot about the IELTS and the TOEFL exam.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that warm welcome.
Okay, so we have a quick poll for all of you guys. This poll, you'll have to answer which test, if you are planning for study abroad, which test among these 2 are you planning to take? And this will give us some sense as to what should we focus upon. Although we'll be covering both of these tests, and Heather will be covering both of these tests in detail, but if you have a specific preference, or even if you might have heard, yeah, I've heard of IELTS as an examination, and that's something which I'm looking to pursue, or it can be TOEFL as well, if that's something which I'm willing to pursue. So select which examination you're looking to pursue, and we'll perhaps clear your myths, clear those doubts across those. Okay, we'll give another 5 seconds for all the folks who haven't answered that yet. Yeah, guys, quickly. Can we have the results, please? Heather, it seems a large chunk of our population, our audience, needs information or is looking for information around the IELTS. So we look forward to clearing some myths upon the acceptability across each of these tests, as well as certain patterns or what to look out for in each of these tests. So over to you, Heather.
All right, thank you so much. So just in case some of you are undecided about which test to take, I know some of you may know exactly what test to take, and some of you may be wondering, which test is better for me. Hopefully today's session really helps clear up some of those, questions for you. To start though, the first thing you should do is check your schools. Some schools will have a preference for one test over another. So obviously you want to follow your school's preference above all. Many US schools will prefer the TOEFL, not all of them, but many of them do. IELTS tends to be a little more popular in like the UK and Australia. Both tests are accepted at over 9,000 institutions across the world, so there's wide acceptability for both of these exams. And if your school doesn't have a preference, you should take a practice test for each and see which one is better suited to your strengths, because some students will just naturally do better at the TOEFL and others will naturally do better at the IELTS. And we'll cover some of the main differences between the tests, but that's a great place to start if you're unsure. Start with your schools and start with your strengths. So we're going to talk about both exams, but first up, we're going to get an overview of what the TOEFL covers. So TOEFL stands for the Test of English as a Foreign Language. And it's designed really to measure your ability to understand English as it's used in a North American academic setting, like at a university. The test is internet-based, so we're going to be talking about the IBT, the internet-based exam today. And it really is a direct measure of your ability to communicate. There's 4 main components. There's reading, listening, speaking, and writing. And it's important to know too that this test, it tests integrated skills, which means there's no discrete point testing. And that means that there's not explicit grammar rules tested, for example. It's all tested through how you communicate. So they'll look at your grammar based on how you're writing and how you're speaking, and during the 4 different sections of the test. So the reading section is up first on the TOEFL. It's 30 to 40 questions, which gives you a time range of 54 to 72 minutes, depending on the number of questions. There'll be 3 to 4 passages, and you will respond to 10 questions per passage. Then you'll move into the listening section, and this test is 41 to 57 minutes long, depending on if you get, closer to 28 or 39 questions. And this is the time where you will answer questions about brief lectures or discussions in a classroom. The speaking section contains 4 tasks. This is a shorter portion of the test. It takes about 17 minutes. One of the tasks will ask you to talk about something familiar, so just a little more casual. And then 3 other tasks will be having you discuss material that you read and listened to. And then finally, the writing section. There's 2 tasks. We're going to take a closer look at both of those very shortly. They'll allow 50 minutes to complete the tasks, and you'll be reading a passage, listening to a recording, and typing your response. So this is one of the differences between the IELTS and the TOEFL, is that the TOEFL is based on the computer. So you want to consider your typing strengths. Many people type faster than they can write, whereas the IELTS can be given on the computer or paper. So consider that, when you're looking at the differences between the tests. Now everyone wants to know about scoring, I'm sure. So the scoring is based on a 0 to a 120 scale. We can see our bell curve here. The 50th percentile is around an 88. So that's a decent starting place. Many of our top tier universities, though, are going to require something a bit higher than the 88. The more competitive the school is, the higher the score requirement is going to be. And if you can aim for 100 plus, that's going to be sort of a widely accepted score across many of the universities that we have here. So how do you know then what's a good score? We talked a little bit about how to determine what test to take. So once you've decided the TOEFL is the test for you, for example, then you want to take a look at your schools and then see what the average school score is at your target program. And that would be your main goal. But then you can see here based on this chart that if you just move up slightly, right, you're moving into an area where you're having a definite advantage over the other applicants. And that can never hurt, right? So going up 3 points gives you a boost, and then 10 more points and 15 more points. So the further you move up the scale, obviously the better. And then on the flip side, if you're a little bit below, that doesn't mean that you won't be admitted, but it's a little bit of a disadvantage in terms of your application process. So now that we have an overview, let's take a closer look at each of these different parts and kind of what to expect on the reading, listening, speaking, and writing. So the reading test is first, and you can always expect these exact 8 question types. Knowing what to expect on the test is a huge component in your confidence when you go into the exam, because you'll know what to expect. There won't be surprises for you. The 8 question types are author's meaning. So those tend to ask about why an author did something. There are vocabulary questions, detail questions. Some questions will ask you to make an inference. Others are about the structure and organization of a passage. And then we have the fun not or except questions. So those require you to kind of switch your thinking. Usually you're looking for the answer that's true, but if it's a not or an except question, you have to choose the answer that's false for those. Then there's also drag and drop questions, and those, they can be table completion or summary type questions. Now these 8 questions are going to be distributed across 3 main categories. So there's language use, basic comprehension, and reading to learn. I know this might be a lot to take in. The more you practice and get comfortable with this exam, though, you'll just start to know all of these things about your test. So language use questions tend to be first, and they make up about half of the total reading score. These questions are going to be primarily vocabulary, author's meaning, and organization questions. And you can see on the chart here the number of questions to expect, and that's per passage on the test. Then you're going to have your basic comprehension questions. Those are going to be about 1/3 of the reading section score. And you'll see detail questions here, the not or except questions, which we can also describe as negative fact questions, and then inference questions as well. And notice too, some of these questions will not appear on every single passage, right? Like the not and except and inference, there's a range of 0 to 2. So there may be a passage where you don't actually see a particular question type. Then finally, we have the reading to learn questions. These tend to be at the end of the question set, and these are where the drag and drop questions tend to live. So your table completion and your summary questions. Most of the questions are multiple choice questions, with the exception of the drag and drop. So those are exactly what they sound like. You'll be dragging an answer to where it needs to go and dropping it in place. The drag and drop questions can be worth 2 or 4 points each. So the scoring is a little bit different on those two. So let's take a look at a practice question. This is a great way to get familiar with our exam. So this is an example of a vocab question. And what we'll see is there's going to be context. There'll be a paragraph, and there will be a word in italics that they want you to figure out the meaning of. So go ahead and read the paragraph to yourself. Just take a moment to read it. Pay attention to the underlined word, and then see if you can figure out what word this is closest in meaning to. So I'll just give you a few moments to do that, and then we'll talk about it all together.
Team, you can use the chat option to answer your questions.
Yes,
So
thank you. I don't think I explicitly said that.
Yes, and we are seeing a lot of responses by everybody.
Excellent. I love the participation and the efforts here. Yes. So what you want to do, these questions are all going to be based on context. So obviously, if you have a strong English vocabulary, that is helpful, but you will be able to use the context of the sentence to help you decipher the meaning of the word. So this sentence in particular, lobsters also consume their molted exoskeletons to replenish lost calcium that is needed for the hardening of their new shells. So the word replenish is closest in meaning to. There's 2 ways you could tackle a question like this. One is to pretend that the underlined word is a blank, and you could predict your own word for the blank and find the answer choice that's closest in meaning. Or you could simply take the answer choices, plug them back into the sentence to see what makes sense. So it doesn't make sense that the lobsters would reduce lost calcium. The calcium's already gone, so they don't need to reduce it. Avoiding calcium doesn't really make sense in context because when you avoid something, you stay away from it. Excreting means to eliminate as waste, and that doesn't fit in the context here. So the overall majority that we are seeing in the chat says to obtain, and that's absolutely correct. Obtain means to get or to acquire. So the calcium was lost, so they need to get more of it to replenish that lost calcium. Okay, so this is what you can expect to see with a vocabulary question. That's one of the 8 question types. Let's take a look at a different type of question. This next one is called an organization question. So you'll notice here we still have a paragraph, and it's still about lobsters and sea animals like the last paragraph was. And you'll see numbered boxes. These 4 squares are places where a new sentence could be added into the passage. So take a moment, read your paragraph here, and then look at our new sentence. So the new sentence, I'll highlight that in green for us. And then you can type in the chat 1, 2, 3, or 4. Which location do you think is best? And then we'll talk about it together when we see those responses in the chat.
So you already see a lot of responses coming in from people. I see a lot of people saying 4. I don't know what the right answer is, but by guessing by the majority, I'll also bet on 4.
All right. Well, in this case, majority wins. So nicely done, everyone. Let's take a look at why 4 is correct, though, because obviously you have a 25% chance of getting it right, but we want more for you on this test. We want your confidence, and we want you to know why the answers are correct. So if we look at the sentence before, we'll just start right here with the word scientists. Scientists now believe that lobsters do very little thinking and feel almost no pain. Tell us in the chat, look at this new sentence. What word do you think is a big clue that tells us where this new sentence needs to be? I'm seeing lots of brain and thinking. Yes. And I saw because in here. Yes, because is a major clue. So we know it's on topic, right? Because they're not going to ask you to add a sentence that's not on topic. So it is about the brain and thinking, but the word because, that tells us that that's the effect. That's the why. Why aren't they doing much thinking? This is the cause. And then because is going to tell us why. So there's a connection between those ideas. Why don't the lobsters do much thinking? Well, their brain is no bigger than a grasshopper's brain. So there's a nice connection in the relationship between those ideas. So learn how to find the clues in the passage that will help you know exactly the precise place for the new question. All right, fantastic job on these 2. That was fun. After you work through the reading portion, then it'll be time to put your headphones on for the listening and the subsequent sections that come after it. So for the listening section, you will be wearing headphones that have a microphone attached. That way, when you get to the speaking portion, you will be able to speak your responses into that. So the listening section is going to cover 2 or 3 conversations between 2 people. So you'll just be listening to a conversation, and there'll be 5 questions that follow. And then there'll also be 3 or 4 lectures, each followed by 6 questions. So the lectures will be more like something you would hear in a university or in an academic type of setting. You'll notice that many of the question types are the same types of questions that you'll see on the reading test. You've got main idea questions, detail questions, function questions, and inference questions as well. So they'll be testing the same skills, but this time, instead of reading it, you'll be listening for those things in the recording. So let's take a closer look at these question types. So for we still have our language use, basic comprehension, and now instead of reading to learn, we have a listening to learn category. Our language use category is made up of function questions, speaker to listener, as well as text support. Basic comprehension includes things like, did you understand the passage, main ideas, details, and being able to make an inference. And then your listening to learn questions are going to cover content relationships. And those are going to be based just on the lectures, not on the conversation listenings. And you'll see 2 of those per exam. So here is an example of what a listening question looks like. We are not going to listen to a recording right now, just simply because of the size and scope of this event here today. But on test day, you would listen to the recording, and then you would see multiple choice questions that follow. So something like, why does the professor tell the student to be honest? And then you would need to recall that portion of the recording to answer the question. And you can see this is a multiple choice question. You would just bubble it in and move on to the next one. And again, just like with the reading test, the best way to master this is to practice. The listening and speaking sections tend to be areas of the TOEFL and of the IELTS that can cause a little more anxiety in students because they're not on paper. So your listening skills and your speaking skills with academic English, the best way to boost those is to listen to English on a daily basis. So listen to it, speak it, even get on YouTube and watch things in English language. It doesn't necessarily have to always be a formal study session, but being familiar and comfortable with the language will be of a great advantage to you on listening and speaking. So speaking of the speaking test, let's take a look at what we can expect here. There's 2 types of tasks on our speaking test. There's independent tasks and there's integrated tasks. So independent tasks are going to ask you to speak about a familiar topic without reading or listening beforehand. So it'll be nothing that you need to stress about. They may ask you about your hobbies or things that are interesting to you or your favorite food. So just very kind of a casual task there. And then the integrated tasks, for these, you'll have to read or listen before you speak. With the speaking test, many students actually make the mistake of focusing on the content and length of their answers when they prepare, but this is just part of the test. So part of your score does come from, the quality of your content and the length of your responses, but you also need to be able to pronounce the words correctly in the English language. Don't worry about your accent. Accents are not taken into account. It's just the exact pronunciation of the word in standard English. So let's take a closer look at each of these tasks. There are 4 total tasks. First up is your independent. That's the one that's a little more casual, just about a familiar topic. They'll give you 15 seconds to prepare and 45 seconds to speak. So this portion of the test does move quickly. Now your 3 integrated tasks will have 3 separate different topics. The first one is going to be a reading and conversation, where you'll be reading some sort of short announcement about a university life topic. They might ask you to listen to a conversation about the same topic, and then there will be a question, and then you will summarize what you've read and heard. Your third task is another integrated task. This is reading and lecture. So you'll read a passage, listen to a short lecture, so just about 90 seconds long or so, and then you'll respond to a question by summarizing and synthesizing what the passage said and what the lecture said. And then finally, the lecture-based task, where you'll listen to a lecture that's about an academic topic, and you'll respond to a question by summarizing what you've heard. So the structure is the same. You'll listen and you'll respond, but the tasks are a little bit different. And we're not practicing the speaking section together now, but again, the best way to get this practice in is to devote some time in your studies to looking at sample questions and practicing some responses. So here is what a sample does look like. So it says for this task, you'll be asked to speak about a topic that's familiar to you. You'll hear a question, and then you will have 15 seconds to prepare your response, and you'll have 45 seconds to speak. So this is an example of the independent task, the one that's about a familiar topic. And we can see that the question is very casual, right? Nowadays, many couples are choosing to have children later in life, sometimes in their 30s and 40s. In your opinion, what's the best age for a couple to have children and why? And then you'll include details and examples to support your opinion. So you'll just be chatting about something that is familiar. It's not academic. It doesn't have to be, thought out like a thesis paper or anything like that. So now we'll take a look at what to expect on the writing portion. There are two tasks on the writing portion of the TOEFL. And the first one is integrated and the second one is independent. So those are the same types of tasks we saw on the speaking test, but now we're going to be asked to write responses rather than speak them. The integrated task is a reading and lecture task where you'll read a passage and then you're going to respond. So you'll have 3 minutes to read, 2 minutes to listen, and 20 minutes to plan and write your response. So you want to keep your headphones on during this time. That way you can listen to the lecture. Now, the second one is where you'll be asked to write about a familiar topic on a short prompt, and you'll have about 30 minutes to plan and write your response. The essays must be typed. There's no spelling or grammar check allowed, so be prepared to type your responses. And another great tip for these tests is to get familiar with the directions ahead of time. That way, when it's test day, you don't have to spend time trying to understand what the directions mean. If you read through those a few times, the directions will remain consistent from test to test. So here's an example of a response. This is an example of an independent task. This is the one about the familiar topic. And it says you have 30 minutes to plan, write, and revise your essay. Typically, an effective response will contain a minimum of 300 words. The instructions for the integrated task are very similar, and they're going to say something like you'll have 20 minutes to plan and write your response. Your response will be judged on the basis of the quality of your writing and how well your response relates to the points in the lecture to those in the reading. Typically, an effective response for this task is 150 to 225 words. So let's take a look at this familiar writing test. This is the independent sample. It says some people prefer to spend their free time outdoors. Other people prefer to spend their leisure time indoors. Would you prefer to be outside or would you prefer to be inside for your leisure activities? Use specific reasons and examples to explain your choice. So notice this does not require extensive background knowledge on any particular topic. This is just, what is your opinion? Would you rather be inside or outside? There's no wrong answer to this question. As long as you support it with reasons and examples, you will get a high mark. I know this is a lot of text on your screen. We're not going to read this. This is simply a sample for you to see what an example response looks like. It just kind of helps us know what to expect. And when you can kind of see a finished product, then you kind of know what direction you should be going when you write your response. I highly encourage you, though, on your own time to look at some sample questions and responses, though, so you can start to learn the characteristics of a well-scoring response. This response in particular uses a lot of descriptive language, which is good. It has many transition phrases, like there's words like because, in my opinion, I typically prefer. So those types of transition words will always strengthen the quality of your response. And this writer also used good examples and reasoning to support their opinion. You don't just want to state your opinion, you have to really explain to the grader why your opinion is what it is. All right, so that's a lot of information about the TOEFL. From our poll at the beginning, I know most of you were kind of leaning toward the IELTS. So let's take a look at that. And we'll be paying attention to some differences between the two exams. There's obviously a lot of similarities, but the differences could help you sway your decision on which test to take one way or another. So IELTS stands for the International English Language Testing System. And this test is designed to measure English proficiency for educational, vocational, and immigration purposes. This is going to measure your ability to communicate in English across language, across listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Those are the same 4 categories that the TOEFL tests. They'll be in a different order, but they do test the same core skills. IELTS is co-owned by the British Council, and there's a portion in Australia and the Cambridge assessment in English. So for the IELTS, there's 2 types. There is the academic version and the general training version. The academic version is for people that are going to university, applying to higher education or professional registration in an English-speaking environment. It reflects some of the features of academic language, and it really assesses for the university if you are ready to begin studying or training in the English language. That's the goal of the exam. The general training is more for people that are going for secondary education, work experience, or training. And in order to migrate to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the UK, it is an absolute requirement. This test is more focused on basic survival skills in broad social and workplace contexts. It's not quite as academic as the academic portion is. The IELTS can be taken on paper or on the computer. So if you have questions about what's available in your area, you're going to want to go to the IELTS website and search for your specific location. Like any standardized test, though, the IELTS, the format of it will remain the same from one test to another, which means the more familiar you are, you'll know exactly what to expect on test day. So a little preparation really does go a long way to sort of calm your nerves and boost your confidence with the test. So here are some general characteristics related to the format of the IELTS. Again, listening, reading, writing, and speaking, the same 4 categories that the TOEFL tests. Listening and speaking are the same for both types of IELTS. So remember, there's the academic and the general training. Listening and speaking are the same. The reading and writing sections are different. So between the academic and the general test, they use different subject matter depending on which type you'll take. The academic test is going to have more academic type passages, where the general one is going to be more applicable to everyday encounters. The listening, reading, and writing sections of this test are all taken on the same day, with unfortunately no breaks in between. So it's just one test right after another. The speaking section is sometimes completed the same day as the test, but it can be taken up to a week before or after. The reason for this is that on the TOEFL, the speaking test is given on the computer. So you speak your response into a microphone. On the IELTS, you will be speaking in front of an actual examiner. So you'll be meeting face-to-face with someone. So that's something to consider. Some people would prefer to have a conversation with a person, and they may feel awkward talking into a computer. And other people may feel the opposite. Other people would rather speak to a computer and might feel awkward talking to someone that they've never met. So that is a big difference in the speaking test. So think about that if you are undecided. The IELTS test is about 2 hours and 45 minutes. The TOEFL is about 3.5 hours. So IELTS is slightly shorter than the TOEFL. Scoring is likely on everyone's mind, as always. So we want to make sure we are getting a good score and a score that will be looked upon favorably by the program that we are applying for. The IELTS uses band scores. They can be scored in whole score increments or half score increments. So you could get a 5, 6, or 7, or a 5.5, 6.5, 7.5. Generally speaking, a 7 and up is considered a good score. Obviously, though, you want to look at your schools because the more competitive the school is, the higher that is going to go up. But 7 and above is considered good, very good. You're in the proficient category when you hit that band. The test report form is going to show a band score for each of your skills, as well as your overall band score for the entire test. You'll get your results online 13 days after you take your test. And when you sign up, when you book your test date, you'll be able to choose up to 5 organizations to send your test results to free of charge. And you can go to IELTS.org for more information about all of those scoring requirements. And that website is right down here, just in case you need that. So the IELTS takes about 2 hours and 45 minutes. So let's take a closer look at how you're going to spend your time. How are the sections broken down? And what is the timing for each? So again, listening, reading, and writing are all taken at the same time. Speaking could be on the same day, or it could be a week before or after, and that's really just going to depend on the examiner and when they can align all of those things. Listening is 30 minutes long. Reading and writing are each 60 minutes. And then your speaking test is short and sweet. It's only going to be about 15 minutes long. So let's take a closer look, just like we did for the TOEFL. We're going to break down what to expect on each of these 4 parts of the IELTS. Listening is 30 minutes. The recordings only play 1 time. So because of that, so we can't, like if you're watching a program on TV and you want to rewind it because you missed what they said, that's great, but we can't do that on the test. So it's really important that we know what to expect and what to listen for. So there's 4 recordings. The first one is going to be a conversation just on an everyday topic. The second one is going to be a monologue, really kind of with real life context, often involving directions on how to get somewhere, or a description of a place or an event or an organization. The third section will be a conversation. Many times it's going to be between 2 students, so 2 or more people about an academic topic. Sometimes it'll be a conversation between a tutor and a student. And then section 4 is a long academic talk by one person, which is similar to what you may call a lecture, right? So it's just going to be part of a lecture. Every section has 10 questions that are worth 1 point each. Just as we know what to expect from the recordings, we can also learn what to expect from the questions. So we'll see multiple choice questions, matching questions, plan, map, diagram, labeling, form, note, table, flowchart, summary completion, sentence completion, and short answer. These are a lot of different question types, and right away you may notice that the IELTS does require more of your own responses than the TOEFL does. The TOEFL does have more straight multiple choice questions. So if you're more comfortable picking the correct answer among provided responses, the TOEFL may be easier for you. The IELTS, because of the variety of question types, does require a little bit more writing your own responses. Now, the listening test is not without challenges. Sometimes it can seem like the speaker is speaking too quickly or that the answer isn't clear. Sometimes the topic itself may be unfamiliar, which even though you don't need outside knowledge, it can make you feel anxious if you're not familiar with what they are discussing. And finally, the vocabulary can be difficult to understand as well. The best way to overcome these is to get used to listening and understanding everyday English. So when you're studying, listening to samples, like official samples, and even just watching programs or videos in the English language, that will be of a great help for you. So here's a sample script for a listening test. So again, we're not going to listen to a recording right now, but this is an example of a task. Rather than having multiple choice questions following it, this particular one would ask you to complete a summary of a welcoming speech. And notice the directions let you know how many words or numbers to write for each of the blanks. So this one says no more than 2 words and or a number for each answer. And then there will be boxes on your answer sheet where you will write your answers. So essentially, you're filling in the blanks. You'll be listening and filling in. One thing to know is that ahead of time, they will provide you a prompt that allows you to preview the questions. So you're going to want to learn how to look for keywords. You can even underline portions. So maybe like underline principal, and then when you hear that word, you'll know to go and fill in that blank right when they say it. The best thing to do is to answer as you're listening as much as you can. That way you don't have to remember all of these words on your own, because it's not multiple choice. It's a lot more to remember than just reading and clicking the correct answer. So here's what we can expect from the reading portion. The reading module contains 40 questions. It will take 60 minutes to complete. There are 3 parts to it. So as such, write your 3 passages. We recommend about 20 minutes per passage. That's just kind of taking your whole 60 minutes, splitting it up into 3 parts. There will be 3 long texts from a book, a journal, a magazine, or a newspaper. And each passage is going to be about 2,000 to 2,750 words in length. But the 20 minutes per passage is not a hard and fast rule. You don't have to stop exactly at 20 minutes. That's just a nice way for you to manage your own time during the exam and make sure you have time to get to all the questions. Now, there's a lot of test types. We're going to take a look at a chart in a moment that kind of lays all this out in a little bit of a more clear format. The questions are worth 1 mark per question. And when you're answering, remember, it's really good if you can get in the habit of answering on your answer sheet as you go. They do not give you extra time at the end to transfer answers over to that answer sheet. So that's something that you do need to budget for with your time. All right, so here's a nice chart for you that lays out all these questions. So we have multiple choice questions. There's true, false, not given, and yes, no, not given. These 2 are very similar to each other. And you just have to decide if the information's there, it's not, or if it's completely false. There's a matching section. You may have to match information, match headings, match features, and sentence endings. There are sentence completion questions, which is similar to the listening one that we showed you. So there'll be sentences with blanks throughout. There's summary, note, table, flowcharts, diagram labels, and then finally, short answer. So again, notice multiple choice is just one of the categories. Many of these responses will require your own input for a lot of the questions. If you can learn how to read a passage in less than 5 minutes, that will give you ample time to answer the questions. That would give you about 15 minutes for the questions for each of the passages and to get those answers down on the paper. So I see a question. Can we solve some sample questions? Yes, we can. We're actually going to take a look at some true, false, not given questions. So for this type of question, we are going to look at the statements and the text. So there's going to be a sentence and then a little excerpt. And we are going to decide if the statement is true, false, or not given. If it's true, that simply means that the statement agrees with the text. If it's false, that means it contradicts the text, so they don't match up. And if it's not given, there's just no information on that particular bit. So if you're going back and you don't see anything there, not given is going to be the answer. So take a look at our statement and our text for this one. And then in the chat, you're going to type true, false, or not given. So we'll give you a few moments to do that.
We have a lot of questions coming up related to from students. Okay, so yeah, we'll devote some time towards that as well.
Excellent. All right, I'm seeing lots of trues. Yes. So visitors to New Zealand like to become involved in local culture. There is an exact place where we could go. Visitors enjoy cultural activities. So this is absolutely a true statement. Well done. Here is another example. So go ahead and do the same. Read the statement, read the text, and you're going to type in the chat true, false, or not given.
No, we already have some quick responses from
We do, yes.
our folks here, yeah.
All right, so this is an interesting one. So it says, when climbing at the Big Rock Center, it's compulsory to be attached by a rope. Compulsory means required. So we want to look at our text, and it says using a rope, right? It mentions using a rope for climbing 11-meter high walls. But then it says, or if you want a thrill of climbing without a harness, they have an option for that as well, with foam mats so that you can fall and, not break your body. So it is false for this one because of the word compulsory, right? So that contradicts what the passage says. The passage gives us an option. It's not actually required to use a rope or a harness. All right, let's take a look at an example of a multiple choice question. So for this one, go ahead and read through the paragraph that you see. And then in the chat, you're going to give us an A, B, C, or D. This is a straight multiple choice question about the paragraph in front of you.
So quickly read through the text, and then perhaps you can use the chat section to just punch in A, B, C, or D.
We have our first response in the chat. It's a good one. All right, so when we read this passage, we can see, right, the very first sentence says, why does music make us feel? So we know it's going to be about feelings and music and connections. And many parts of this passage talk about physical responses to music, right? How it makes us feel. It talks about our eyes dilating, our pulse and our blood pressure go. So it talks about what our brain does. So the correct answer for this is how intense our physical response to music can be. And then in our classes, when you're preparing, you also want to take a look at why the wrong answers are wrong as well. Learning about all those things will help you make sure that you can pick the right one during the test. But let's take a quick look at the writing format, because I know there's a lot of questions that you want us to answer before we wrap up today. Writing is 60 minutes. There's 2 parts. The first task is more of a report. They're going to give you some type of visual, a graph, table, chart, or diagram, and you have to give a 150-word report, and they give you about 20 minutes to complete that task. Task 1 carries about 1/3 of the points. Task 2 carries about 2/3 of the points. So you naturally want to spend more time on task 2 because that's worth more points. Task 2 is going to ask you to respond to a point of view, to an argument or a problem. And they'll give you 40 minutes to do that. And they're looking for at least 250 words in the response. The style is academic or semi-formal, neutral. They are going to score you on task achievement or task response. Basically, how well did you answer the question? They'll also score you on coherence and cohesion, which means how well are you linking your own thoughts in the paragraph, creating a flow and structure in your response. Lexical resource means how well are you using vocabulary? So it's your demonstration of English vocabulary through your writing. And then finally, they also will score you on your grammar and accuracy. So using simple sentences as well as complex sentences and how to work those in to your response. Just like the speaking test, the writing test is not without challenges. Every single one of these challenges that you may encounter can be helped with practice and with preparation, right? So if you feel like you're running out of time, well, the more you practice, the faster you'll get. If you are worried about spelling and grammar, the more you write in English and the more you read in English, you'll learn all that stuff in a real world context. So this first example would show what task number 1 looks like. You would be writing a report based on this circle graph that mentions visitors to the local cinema by age. So you will be drawing your own conclusions based on the facts that this table tells you. It's a report, not an essay. So you're actually going to keep your opinions out of task 1. Task 2 is where your opinions come into play. So they will give you a prompt, and you're going to be discussing both of the viewpoints given in this particular prompt, and make sure you include relevant examples to support your opinion. And they're going to want at least 250 words from this response. Finally is our speaking test. This is the one where you will meet with a real life person and chat with them. It's going to take about 11 to 14 minutes. The first one is a little more casual. 4 to 5 minutes, the examiner is just going to ask you some basic questions about maybe your home, your family, or interests. The second part is your individual long-term. So they're going to give you a topic, and then you will speak for about 2 minutes in response to that. And then the third part is sort of a two-way conversation about the same topic. So they will kind of ask follow-up questions, up to 7 questions, where the examiner is going to determine if you are proficient or not. They're going to grade you on fluency and coherence, so your ability to express your words verbally without lengthy pauses or hesitations. They'll score you on lexical resource, which is vocabulary, grammatical range and accuracy, which is using proper grammar structures, and as well as pronunciation. So that's just your ability to speak clearly, knowing when to stress words, the intonation of a sentence, and making it sound natural. Again, accents are not taken into consideration, so that's nothing to stress about. Here are some challenges on the speaking test, right? If you don't hear the question, you can ask the examiner to repeat it, right? So they are people, they can respond to that. If you maybe are speaking and you can't remember what an English word is, just continue talking. The word may come back to you, or you could replace it with a different word that does make sense for you. But again, practice is key. So this is just a quick glance at each of the different portions, right? Your introduction, they're gonna, just kind of just chat with you, just get to know you a little bit. Where do you live? Where were you born? They might talk about your family. So that's a very casual portion. Then they'll give you a task card for the second part. You'll read the topic, right? Describe a musical event you enjoyed attending. You're going to say what the event you attended was, where it took place, who was with you, and then why you enjoyed. So it's similar to an essay, but you are speaking your response. And then the examiner may ask a couple follow-up questions like, well, do you play music? What instrument do you play? So it's a very, very much a conversation. And then finally, part 3 is further questions about part 2. So for the music topic, it might ask, how expensive is it to attend a concert in your country? Do you think it's better to listen to live music or music on the TV or radio? Why or why not? Do you think there's too much music available now? So they'll just be follow-up questions all tied in to that same topic. I hope, Tanisha, I agree. That is a good topic. That'd be a really nice one to speak about, wouldn't it? Very relatable. So that is just a big overview. I know it's a lot of information. Thank you all so much for your time and for your attention. I know we have some questions, so I'll turn it over to you.
Before we move on to questions, I'd like to actually announce to our users that we'll shortly be starting with our next marathon session, which is our 3rd session for today. And it's going to be all about studying abroad and living abroad on a budget. Okay, so we have a wonderful set of panelists who will be speaking about how you can actually study and live abroad on a budget for people who have certain financial constraints, what to do, what not to do in order to actually gain advantage and perhaps not put a strain on your pocket or your family's pocket as well. So Heather, we have a couple of great questions that we have come in. I would also thank my team who's tirelessly working and answering those questions as well. So a couple of questions with respect to cost. Okay, what does each of these tests costs to individuals, IELTS and TOEFL?
Right. So there is a range. And the best way to make sure you're getting the most accurate pricing is before, when you're registering to go in. And because if cost is a factor, you do want to consider that because budgets are real and it's something that everyone needs to be aware of. So
Correct.
in the US, the IELTS is about $200 to $250. That's US dollars.
Okay.
It kind of varies by country though, between like 165 and 300. And the TOEFL is generally in the same price range. So again, that's US dollars though. So make sure that you kind of consider budget options when you're looking at the tests.
Secondly, with the introduction of internet-based, which students can take at home tests at home versus a test center-based test, what advice would you give our audience? Which one should they prefer?
So it really depends on your comfort level. Some students get really anxious going to a testing center and, being watched and it's very official and things like that. But at home, there can be distractions, family members and pets and telephones and things. So if being at home could be more comfortable, but you also have to be aware that there are distractions. So those are two big things I would think about when trying to decide which one's best for you.
Got it. That's absolutely true. Another question that pops into my head is that how much time would I need as an individual to excel in either of these two tests? So a minimum time frame that you can actually recommend, perhaps a max or a min, that would be great for our audience.
Right. So generally, we like to recommend about 3 to 6 months. And that's because that will give you kind of more of a slow and steady pace. You can learn over time. You don't have to cram and spend 15 hours a day studying and getting burned out and stressed. So kind of doing a little bit over a long period of time is more effective, and that will better prepare you for life abroad as well.
Got it. Thank you so much. So this was really insightful, Heather. We already have a lot of questions from coming in people, but due to time constraint, we won't be able to cater all of them. We have a wonderful giveaway for all our folks who have joined the session today. So we'll be giving some exclusive discounts on IELTS and TOEFL preparation. Okay, so all of you who are looking for preparing for IELTS or TOEFL, just use this link where you can submit a feedback and you'll get the respective discounts via email. So my team has shared the link in the chat, as well as you can see, you can click a picture of this screen as well, and you can fill up that feedback and get that exclusive discount to start preparing for your IELTS or your TOEFL examination. Finally, I would like to thank Heather for this wonderful session, taking us through all the nuances about IELTS and TOEFL in such detail. I was simply amazed by the detail we went through and the lovely questions. And thank you to the audience as well for being such a proactive, such a great audience and answering questions that Heather put up. And thank you so much, Heather, for joining us today. Guys, I look forward to all of you joining the iSchoolConnect community as well. Click a picture. It's a wide student run community of about more than 10,000 students from across the globe. Make use of that. We share some valuable information on this community. So make use of that.